مساء الخير. You see, I'm greeting you in the land's language, because language is very important. Maskagro is me greeting you in my language, in Nubian language. Welcome and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us, for choosing to be here with us. You could literally be doing anything else in the world, and you are here, and we are grateful. Very grateful. Before I start, I have to give a special shout out to any Exonian in the room. Anyone here from Exeter University witnessing that I continue to protest. A little different than we did in Bedford Square, but the protest and the revolution continues. So thank you for being here as well. Now, ladies, gentlemen, sisters, brothers, everyone, if you are here for a lecture, you'll be sorely disappointed. At a growing culture, we don't do lectures. We do questions, we do dialogue, we do conversation. We don't have the answers. We dig for them together, and we grow. So, we invite you to join us in this growing journey. We've been here, this is Lauren and I's first time in Jordan, and there's been a lot of growth, and it's been very, very exciting. And we've been asking a lot of questions. We've been asking ourselves a lot of questions about the work we do, the work we've been doing, but also how inspiring everything that's happening here in Jordan has been. So to do that, for us to be in conversation and dialogue, and for us not to be lecturing you, we need to get an idea of who's in the room. So we'll be asking questions. No, we're not gonna ask about your marital status or your name, just yet, maybe after. But for now, just an idea of where your thoughts are, where you are. And I'll yield to Lauren to ask these questions, but please, be open. Let's get a gist, a feel of who's here, so we can actually have a conversation. Because we don't talk about food enough. Except, oh, I need to stop eating, or oh my God, I ate too much, or oh, I'm starving and want to eat. But we need to talk about food, about everything that has to do with food. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Lauren to tell us who's in the room. Go for it.
Thanks, Deepa. I think everybody knows how challenging the times are today. You turn on the newspaper, I guess you don't turn on newspapers. You open the newspapers, right? Turn on the news, and we're being bombarded with a million different crises and things. And so, Deem and I are really interested to hear from you all, what are your greatest concerns today? What are the most pressing issues that keep you up at night? And please, just shout it out if you can.
Someone has a new baby in the house, that might be someone or something that's keeping them up at night. Literally anything.
Finals.
Finals, okay.
Okay, we have some students here, yeah.
What else?
11-hour flight.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, that would do it. That would do it. What else? What keeps you up at night? Sorry?
Palestine.
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 Thank you.
Yes.
What about climate change?
Earth.
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 The plunder of.
The plunder of Earth. Poverty.
The future of our children.
The future of our children.
All right.
The nagging of our mothers to get married. I'm just saying, we're being honest.
So with all of this, what's interesting to us as well is, in the face of all these daunting issues, these pressing issues, what keeps us going? What gives us hope? What fuels us?
Solidarity.
Yes.
Community.
Community.
Religion, I guess, give us hope.
Religion.
Maybe resistance for freedom.
Resistance for freedom. What else?
What if we're not hopeful?
That's okay,
That
But
happens.
it feels like we're in such big times.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Does looking for hope give you hope?
No.
Access to knowledge, easier access to knowledge.
Easier access to knowledge. That gives you hope. Okay. What keeps you going? What keeps you going? Instead of when you don't have hope, when you don't feel hopeful, how are you getting out of bed?
A good meal.
A good
There we go.
meal. A good meal. Because you can be tired, but you smell fresh bread or some chocolate or a nicely cooked chicken. You know, a nicely cooked meat. Thank you for that. Whoever said that. I'm hungry now.
Yeah, who said that? Who said? All right.
How about coffee?
Yes.
Yeah, you see, the things we take for granted, y'all. Seriously.
A walk by the river or by
A walk
nature.
by
the river. Walk in nature. Just feels so much easier.
Yes.
Food is such a part of our lives, and for so much of us, we take it for granted. The fuel that it's given to us, how it can be used to build solidarity, to connect us with nature, to weaponize, to colonize. Food is the ultimate double-edged sword, right? It can be used as this tool for oppression and extraction, or it can also be used as a tool for healing and love. And today we're hoping to explore that beautiful tension.
You want to tell them when you're...
Oh yeah, we are a growing culture. We are an activist collective from around the world, and we work to confront the narratives that hold up injustice in our food system. Now, all of the issues that we talked about today, from climate change to occupation to colonization to gender inequality, we believe to access to knowledge. We believe all these are tied to our agricultural system. We see agriculture as the womb that gave birth to these injustices. At a growing culture, we work to confront those narratives, to shift consciousness around to reimagining a food system rooted in liberation and solidarity, in love, in our mother's bread. And so we're going to explore a little bit more of that today.
I'm being instructed to speak closer to the mic. I'm going to try and not take offense because at some point I used to protest without a megaphone and managed to bring George Bush to the window. We tell stories at a growing culture. We tell stories we don't hear about. And we don't not hear about them because the people experiencing these stories are voiceless. We don't hear about them because the people experiencing these stories continue to be silenced intentionally and deliberately, so that you don't hear the story, so that you don't connect it to your story. Because our stories are connected, because we are connected. We are all connected. So I'm going to start with a story about how food is political. And it also goes back to Exeter. I should probably give a disclaimer. Lauren and I don't do scripted stuff. We do have a scripted attempt of a script here. We've already gone off script at least 3 times in the past 4 minutes. So this is also off script. But it's a story that reminded me and shows me about how food is political. So at Exeter University, we had Arabic Society, and I was, at the time, while identifying as an Arab, I no longer do, but at the time I did. I was the president of the Arabic Society. I was also the liaison officer of the Friends of Palestine Society. Now, around the Nakba, JSOC, which was the Jewish Society of Exeter, decided to celebrate their Independence Day. And they had an event on Facebook, back when events on Facebook were like nice and popular and hopping and stuff, and their photo for their event, their invite to the event, was a falafel sandwich with a toothpick coming out of the falafel and the Israeli flag on it. I'm not really sure why exactly. I'm sure it was a number of reasons, but I was so angry. I was just, what do you mean, come celebrate our national dish on our national day? You got jokes. And it wasn't so much that, I felt like falafel is Palestinian because, I grew up in Egypt, so as far as I'm concerned, falafel is Egyptian. I don't know about y'all.
Exactly.
But, we can sit and go back and forth about it, but the fact is, they used food to bring people to that celebration. They used food that was not theirs to rewrite their narrative. Now, I wasn't going to let that slide, and anyone who knew me in Exeter or is meeting me now or will get to know me later will tell you, I just don't let things just go. That's not how things happen. So, I found out every place in Exeter that sold falafel, who were Arab, and I went and I let them know that the Jewish Society was having that event and that they should feel very free to hike up the prices. Then I had all the Arabs that I could reach out to on campus, and all the members of Friends of Palestine registered to that event. And so they had to order more falafel at a hiked up price. And then I sent a message saying at 3 p.m., everyone changed their profile pictures to the flag of Palestine. That event was so lit. Now, I had to change the photo a little earlier because I had a board meeting as Arabic Society. And my vice president was a loyal member of JSOC. So I went there dressed in black, and I had the Palestinian hatta, the kafiyya, and I had the Palestinian flag on my back. And I walked into my board meeting, and one of the members was like, oh, you're in your protest gear. I wore black in all our protests, because black is truth and power. So at 3:05, JSOC was notified. That event was made private. The Exeter police and the campus police were notified because JSOC felt threatened because all these Palestinian flags just popped up at their event. Of course, we had an entirely different event set up where we had dabka and shisha ready, so no one was actually going to attend that event. We had no intention. But just to show them that we are going to reclaim what's ours, even if we don't show up physically. We can let you know, and we will haunt your very presence, because what's ours is ours. That's what happens when you reclaim your truth, when you reclaim your foodways. When you stand in your power and you're not really afraid to have it questioned of what came first, you know your truth. You don't need someone to ask or to doubt or to question. Food is political. The thing is, in our societies and in the world in general, there's this confusion between politics and power. So anything that is foundational to our power as people, because people are power, the power is always with the people. Anything that is foundational to our power is as political as it is intentionally depoliticized by the political system. I'm going to say that again. Anything that is foundational to our power as people is as political as it is intentionally depoliticized by political systems. So culture becomes non-political. Language becomes cultural, so it is non-political. Heritage becomes culture, and it is non-political. You know what else becomes cultural and non-political? Food. Food becomes cultural and non-political. But the truth is, culture is political. Culture is our compass for engaging with one another. Culture allows us to embrace each other's differences and not fear them, because culture is rooted in love. Our food, the food we consume today, it doesn't nourish us as humans. It is nourishing a system that is built upon oppression and exploitation and extraction. Extracting your culture and commodifying it and making it something hip and cool to be consumed. So, back to the dialogues here, and back to these narratives, and the stories we tell ourselves, and the things we worry about at night. How many here think there is a food shortage, that we don't have enough food in this world to feed everyone in this world? Raise your hand if you do. All right. So you're telling me that everyone in this room knows that enough food is being produced in this world to feed everyone. If that's what you believe, put your hands up. There is hope, y'all, there is hope. Okay. So how many here think that this reason and these conversations about food insecurity and food shortage and poverty is linked to climate change? Some. Okay. Rephrase the question. One of the narratives that we're being told is that there's not enough food, or there's this food shortage, or because it's the droughts, it's the climate crisis. The climate crisis is causing this food shortage. It's causing food insecurity. And that the only solution to feed everyone is industrial agriculture. That's the narrative that's being peddled. I'm very grateful to see some heads shaking, and I'm going to pass it on to Lauren to drop some facts here.
You want to speak?
Lauren, what have you done?
I don't know. Some things aren't meant to be. We all hear the news right now. Everything is all about panic, panic, panic. There's a food shortage. This conflict between Ukraine and Russia is creating a food shortage, right? One of the big statistics that's shared all the time right now is that almost a third of the world's wheat is being held up in Russia and Ukraine, right? So the truth is, Russia and Ukraine produce 29% of wheat imports around the world, right? That's the truth. But guess what else is the truth? That's only 1% of global wheat production. The vast majority of wheat is grown and consumed domestically. It's not imported. That's not the case, as we've learned, with Jordan, right? In 1960, 200% of the wheat necessary to this beautiful country was grown here. Today, what, 2%? And instead you're peddled this. Right? So where does that power sit? Stats, data is used to peddle these narratives that allow us to believe. They want us to be scared of food shortages, because that is the linchpin, that is the vehicle of industrial agriculture, so that they can control us all, right? So what if I told you that, when you open up these These articles, you always see, to feed a growing population by 2050, we have to increase food production. That's always the thing that is being peddled. We already produce enough food for the 2050 population, expected population. We produce enough food for 1.5 times the world population. Yet, in a population of 7 billion today, 1.2 billion go to bed hungry. That math does not work without injustice. Think about that. Enough for 1.5, and yet people are starving. This is not about production. It's about politics. This is an issue of political will. People are starving because they can't afford food, right? So, just looking here, over 1 billion are hungry. Between 60 to 70% of the hungry are involved in agriculture. How can this be? How can we be starving the very ones that are producing our food? What kind of system would create that, right? Today, there's 2.5 billion people. Almost 40% of the world's population are involved in what we call the peasant food web. These are smallholder producers, craftspeople, bakers, the people that are tied to a localized food system. Right? Yet we're starving them because our industrial system tells them not to produce food for themselves and their community. Don't diversify. Produce food for the market. Shift them to produce one crop, and that their economic compensation for that crop should be enough to afford food. And guess what the reality is? Farmers now become net food purchasers for their household, and they can't afford their own food to survive. This is the political nature. This is what's happening. Now, I think we could have showed you these maps, and we probably should have in hindsight because we're going off script, but let's just roll with it. Imagine a map here, okay? Let's use this power of imagination, right? Imagine a map of biodiversity hotspots all around the world, right? Okay? Looks pretty good, right? You can see the areas right now, huh? Of all the biological diverse hotspots. Now, cultural diversity is best determined by lingual diversity. So then I'm going to put up a map here. Okay, everybody look. Second map, lingual diversity around the world. And if one thing you guys are all probably noticing is these maps look alike, not only in imagination, but in real life. Cultural diversity and biological diversity are one and the same. The areas, you can't have one without the other. Now, if I showed you a map of climate change vulnerability, it would be the same map. Those are the most vulnerable spots to climate change. And then if you want to understand the final, most daunting aspect of the reality, is if I showed you a map, oh, that got different now. Yeah. If I showed you a map of land grabbing, of the foreign theft of land, which happens today all over the world, it is the same spots. Our industrial system is taking and stripping away of the biological and cultural diverse spots and consolidating that in corporations. So this unjust system that we're dealing with, right? This system that is supposed to be nurturing us is also harming us.
Has it ever nurtured us?
Well, that's the question, right?
It's supposed to, but
It's the supposed to, and we can think about this. You know, when Dima was talking about politics, right? Where was the birth of politics? It was around agriculture, but not just all agriculture. There was a certain type of agriculture that gave birth to politics, and that was grain, wheat. Does anybody know why that wheat and grain birthed the state versus crops like potatoes or carrots?
It lasts for long.
Huh?
It lasts for long.
Okay. Lasts for long. I think we're getting close there. Anybody else have any ideas?
Monsanto and their
Monsanto wasn't there back then, but sure. Yeah. What happens when you grow wheat and a community grows wheat? Does it all come into harvest at the same time? Yeah? So you can walk and see all the fields in harvest. Now, if I grow potatoes and the tax man comes, I can keep those potatoes in the ground for 2-3 years and say, what potatoes? But wheat, grain, is visible. And so the tax collector can come and say, you owe this, you owe this, you owe this. That birthed the empire. That birthed the silo, the storage, the politics, the distribution. Right?
Didn't it happen with sugar? Did it happen with other crops in different times? And empires were
Absolutely. That system then merged to other crops. But Tigris, Euphrates, Wang Zi, Mesopotamia, these were wheat and grain empires. The birth of this, the infrastructure was born there. A lot of people say that the first written form, cuneiform, the first written form for 500 to 800 years was not used for history, for poetry, but was used for tallying of tax and slaves. So, you're right, when was it ever? When was our food system ever? But what if it could be? What if it could actually be healing and nurturing?
That's it, that's recognizing that power. For us to start imagining a different reality, we need to first acknowledge where we are. And in doing that, we also need to acknowledge
that food is a weapon. It can be weaponized. It is being weaponized. It's also a double-edged sword. It can be used to shackle people into submission, like how the Muslim Brotherhood did over Eid al-Adha in Egypt to rally up votes by subsidizing the prices of sheep for the sacrifice. And it can be used for power, like how my people in Sudan have used. How many here know what's happening in Sudan right now? It is very, very sad to not see more hands up. But I am not surprised, because that too is deliberate. Since December 2018, and this is a moral responsibility, so I will go off script. I had intended to bring your attention to the revolution of Sudan at the end of this talk, but I will do it here and I will do it now. Since December 2018, the youth, the brave youth of Sudan, took to the streets, a revolution of consciousness to end a system of tyranny of over 30 years. More than half the youth on the streets, all they knew as an authority has been the tyrant that is Omar al-Bashir. Now, the media will have you believe that this revolution has ended and they signed a facade of a transitional agreement between civilians and military, and that is rubbish. Because the revolution continues, because as long as the military is in power, then the civilians are not in power, and as long as power is not with the people, this revolution of consciousness continues. Now, when we talk about food as a weapon, I should probably add, those who celebrated the signing of this facade of an agreement, were then faced with the reality, the inevitable reality, that the military overthrew that civilian-led government, or I should say civilian, because arrested the prime minister and continued in its agenda for them to continue staying in power. How many of you here know that Sudan, or have heard Sudan being referred to as سلة الغذاء العربي? The food basket of the Arab world. Here's the joke. It is not the food basket of the Arab world. Sudan has been recognized internationally by international organizations and institutional as the food basket of the world, not just the Arab world. Sudan doesn't just have enough to feed itself and our neighbors. By our neighbors, I mean all our African neighbors, because we are an African country, and our Arab neighbors as well. No, we have enough to feed the entire world. So when this system will have its youth go out thinking and believing that they will starve to death, we need to ask more questions. So, since they overthrew, since the Sudan coup, and if you need more information, and I encourage you to please ask more questions and please find out what's happening in Sudan, because it is connected not just to Sudan, it is not about Sudan, this is about liberation everywhere. Look up sudancoup.com and check some facts. What did the local resistance committee, the people on the streets in the northern states, the Nubian states, I am Nubian, so I'm proud when I share this. I'm proud when I speak about the Sudan revolution everywhere. But this particular thing was a nice sticking point, because what the local resistance committees in the northern state did is that they blocked off the border with Egypt. Any food going out of Sudan into Egypt was stopped. And they said not one sesame will leave this land until our people get what's ours. That is power. That is how we as a people can weaponize food. To reclaim our power, to reclaim every inch of our land. That is food sovereignty. Then Egypt had to reckon with what it's doing and how it's supporting a military regime in Sudan that continues to bleed us dry, but I'll digress. Thomas Sankara, the great ancestor, with his revolutionary spirit that is present with us here, said, "He who feeds you controls you." And of course the language is different. I will also say, she who feeds you controls you. How many here grew up in an Arab household? Actually, it doesn't matter what household you grew in. If your mother fed you, you know your mother controls you. With all due respect to all mothers and their flying ships. But is it your mother that's cooking and making this food that is feeding you? Or is it who's buying the food that's feeding you? And is it who's buying the food that's feeding you? Or is it who's producing the food that's feeding you? What is the correlation between these three clusters or three groups? Because our relationships with each other is then reflected into our relationship with this environment. What is that link? Who's really feeding us? How many of us stop and think before we eat? What was the journey of this food today? How many hands touched this food today? And I know Rana might not like this because we asked this question yesterday before we ate, and it was just like, who really wants to think how many hands touch this food before we eat it? But that's also an attack on our culture. That very thought is an attack on our culture. We eat with our hands. We eat on the ground. As indigenous people. But no, we have to eat in separate plates and forks and have tissues and antibacterials because, oh my God, we're going to get sick. And then we have to go. But that's also because we got disconnected from the land, from Mother Earth, which provides us with every medicine we will ever need. We have to ask more questions. And we have to start again, every time you eat. Who's feeding you? Ask that question. Lauren, drop some facts for us.
Well, I guess I'm the fact dropper.
You're the fact dropper, man. You're the fact. I don't do numbers. Listen, I don't do numbers. I tell you why I don't do numbers. And this is from my friend and brother, Omar, who's a math teacher. He says the problem isn't with math. The problem is with how maths is being taught. And that's the issue with everything. The problem isn't with schools. The problem is with the education system, and it goes back to the system, and we need to recognize that systematic change needs to happen.
And so, that systematic change, right? Let's talk about the systematic change. Yeah, no, I love it. We can keep going. There's no clocks on this. You know, anyone who challenged this systematic change, what do you think happened to their faith? Our brother Thomas Sankara, where is he? Biko, Lumumba, Cabral, right? You know, there's a clip when Sankara came to power, he's meeting with the French president, and they're on this TV, and he tells the French president, you know, because of colonialism, right? All of that debt, which is weaponized, right? Right? All that debt we owe you, supposedly. We don't owe it to you anymore. It's clean. Consider it a bargain trade done for all of that injustice you've done to our people. And the French president was all shuffled, and he said, well then, we're not gonna give you any more aid. He goes, oh, that was the second thing. I don't want your aid. Okay? He understood what that aid meant. What this meant right here. Undercutting the local markets. This is no gift, right? What if I told you that for every dollar of aid the continent of Africa receives, $24 is taken out, right? They want you to think that Bill Gates and these philanthropists are subsidizing, US aid is subsidizing. Who's subsidizing who? Who is subsidizing who? What if I told you that 80% of the world's cacao is grown in West Africa, not Colombia, not Mexico, but they get less than 2% of the $100 billion revenue. They grow 80%, but get less than 2% of the revenue. This is post-colonial world, right?
I'm sorry, there's no post-colonial anything. Colonialism is alive and well. We have to be very intentional with our words. Anyone that says post-colonial, put some air quotes in their face to remind them that colonialism is alive and well. I know you know this, but we have to say it. We need to presence this. There is no such thing as post-colonialism.
It is now done with briefcases, with legal frameworks, with UPAV and doctrine of discovery, right? Which we'll get into. But right now, Dima changed the side because we should move to this, right?
Who feeds us?
Who feeds us, right? Because we talked, one of the things Dima said was, is it the producers that have power? But when they're producing 80% and getting less than 2%, how much power do they really have? Who is setting those rules, right? Small-scale peasant indigenous communities feed 70% of the world, using less than 25% of the land, 10% of the fossil fuels, and 20% of the water. Yet, every country puts money into the development of industrial farming. Because people think it's necessary to feed the world. Right? I believe that if you went from Jordan to China, to Zimbabwe, to the United States, all over the world, and you ask people, what do you think of industrial agriculture? They're gonna say it pollutes, it consolidates control, right? I don't think there's a positive outlook, but they're gonna say it's necessary to feed the world. It's a necessary evil, and that is just not true.
Colonialism has been naturalized as if that's the world, way of the world.
Normalized.
You know,
another buzzing word in here.
the root of the word colonization is culere, which means to cultivate.
To
Cultivate. These go hand in hand. This is it. It's tied to everything here, right? And so what does it look like today, right? 4 companies control over 60% of the seed market. How many of those companies are Jordanian? Okay. 4 companies control over 75% of global grain trade. How many of those companies are African?
Really hurting here.
Yeah. 4 companies control over 65% of the agrochemical market. Right? This is consolidation. Right? If you look at our food system, think about it as an hourglass. Right? You have producers on the bottom, 2.5 billion, let's not forget. This is a huge population. And then you have consumers. And in the narrow part is these corporations which have their hands around our throats, our necks. This is what we're dealing with. And it pits us against each other. Right? To have affordable food, like there is such thing as cheap food, right? We end up not recognizing the labor of who? The producers, right? If you want to recognize the labor of the producers, you create non-affordable food and you end up decreasing access. And that's how they win. They've divided and conquered. So, these corporations decide the terms of who gets fed and who doesn't. They hold the rules. Food is weaponized to distract people into submission, to a system of oppression. It pits us against each other. And we're told it's our problem to fix. If we only composted our food, if we did this, if we bought organic, if we did this, right? This is gaslighting. We're not the problem, they are, right? I was at a talk the other day, and you know, okay, not a talk, I'm sorry, it was a fundraiser. I was at the fundraiser the other day. There were some rich people there. The reason we didn't get any money is because of the story I'm about to tell you. One person said, we were talking about climate change and agriculture, and this person said, you know, if you took all of the world's animals and you put them into one country, what percentage of emissions would it be? It would be the 4th largest country, right? And I looked at him and I said, what if you took the 1%? What would there be their emissions? They did not like that. These are the ones with the private jets. The 1% produce 40 to 50% of global emissions. More than any cow. Don't blame the cow. Don't blame the goat. It's the rich. What percentage of corporations, right? These are class issues. And we're distracted by this. Time and time again, we're told it's our problem to fix. So some college student, let's just say Exeter college student, because I guess that's the thing here, they feel guilty flying on a plane. They feel guilty in everything they do. They're immobilized, they're paralyzed in this guilt, right? Let's not forget that the concept of recycling was developed by the oil companies, right? The concept of carbon footprint was developed by BP and Oglesby, PR campaign, to get us to believe it's our problem, not theirs. And now they're doing this with food. Do we want to?
Yeah, let's put Petra now.
Petra?
A glimpse of really a queen in my eyes.
Yes.
And a glimpse of who feeds us here. When I play.
Do we want to just mention Upav and what the struggle, or do we want to do that after? To give them context, what do you think?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, there is an international treaty on biodiversity called UPAV. It's a French acronym, and I don't speak French, so please don't ask me what those letters mean. But it was developed by Western countries, amended 3 times. In the 90s, the World Trade Organization was forced to adopt it. To now be a player in the World Trade Organization, you have to adopt and sign on to UPAV. Now, here's the trick. If you're a new signatory, you have the new version. But if you're the original signatories, you don't have the new versions, right? You can hold to the earliest version, which were much less stringent. And this is a treaty to harmonize seed policy around the world, which effectively bans and criminalizes indigenous seeds from the market. If you take indigenous and local seeds to the market, you can be jailed, your land taken, and this is being pushed all over the majority world. Right? This is really dangerous, and this is the reality that is being faced. And here is a woman whose life is being threatened for saving her indigenous seeds.
This seed was given to us by God. We have sovereign right to this seed. It is a symbol of our freedom to be who we are, to grow what we want to grow, to eat what we want to eat, to share what we want to share. It's a birthright, and it is a symbol of our cultural heritage. I found my life's purpose growing this local seed and distributing it far and wide. And yes, I've been threatened, but I'm not fazed. It's something that I'm prepared to die for. No one has got the right to come and dictate to us which seed to grow, which seed to keep, which seed to share. What right do they have? Can they be above God who gave us this seed? Let me tell you one thing. Every day I get on my knees and I pray to God and I come against these multinationals that are trying to destroy our seed sovereignty. And they will not succeed. You will not succeed. At the end of the day, it is these bullies, these multinationals who benefit, not us. We are slowly killing ourselves and we are slowly killing off the environment while they go away happy with the fat bank accounts. You cannot fight God. You can intimidate us. You can bully me, but you will never succeed against God. And I will never stop growing this maize because it was given to me by God. I really get upset that a man, a person, an organization can take it upon themselves to dictate to everybody in the world how they should live their lives, what they should eat, what seed to grow. What right do you have? You've got no right. And I repeat myself, you will not succeed. It doesn't matter how many people you kill in the process, but you are not going to succeed. And my husband and I will not stop growing this local seed. In fact, we are looking for bigger tracts of land where we can grow this on a larger scale. You don't intimidate us. We fear only God, not man.
I take a moment to recognize Petronela's partner and husband and comrade in this fight who has transitioned during COVID and the excessive pressure that she continues to endure in this fight. And I remind myself, and I remind you all, that she is not the only one. and that we have a responsibility as human beings to find out how others are being oppressed and how it connects to us. Ask more questions. Because the questions we ask connect us far more than the answers we seek. Far more. Petronella is one of many who is the embodiment of food as liberation, of food as power, as a reminder that seed is power. She's being threatened to even share these seeds. How many of you witnessed your mothers or your grandparents share plates over Ramadan or Eid with your neighbors and the neighborhood? Can you imagine being arrested for that? Can you imagine being fined for that? Can you imagine being made to disappear? Can you imagine losing your home, losing your land for that? For something that is so intrinsic and natural and innate to you as a human being, to want to connect and share with others. Sit with that. What are the thoughts that come up when you think of that? This is why we say food sovereignty and not food security. This is a quote we use a lot with Raj Patel. You can be food secure in a prison. They will give you food in a prison. You don't get to choose that food. You don't get to choose where that food comes from. But there is food security. But is that the life you want? Or do you want agency over the food you choose? Or do you want agency over how you get that food? How you cook it? Who you cook it with? Food sovereignty recognizes that agency, not just to those who produce the food, but to every human being. Food sovereignty is our divine right to dignified access to food, so that we don't have to beg, so that we don't need charity that is masquerading as aid for whatever agenda that is serving some power or some disillusioned entity that thinks it has control over us as humans. Food is liberation because food brings us together. Our liberation as people is recognizing that our liberation is not in our independence. That is a lie. Our liberation is in our interdependence. It is recognizing that not one of us is free until we are all free, and that we don't get to pick and choose the battles. All lies need to be eradicated. All fear needs to be eradicated. Hypocrisy altogether needs to be eradicated. Recognizing the truth, recognizing the very basic divine truth. Do you see how calm Petronella was in recognizing that this is a birthright? No one has the power to take that from me. And guess what? No one has the right to take that from you. You here in this room, you being the collective you being all of us, you being me too. Because we are connected. We need to ask questions because, again, this is systematic change that is required. And I say change and not fixing. Why? Because this system, this global system, it's not broken. Politicians who say the system is broken, we need to fix it. The system is not broken. The system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It is built upon oppression and exploitation and extraction. It is built to keep us isolated. This system must be eradicated. And how to eradicate it is to stop feeding it and start feeding ourselves. So my question to you, as we ask more questions, is what does agency in the hands of Jordanians look like? What does Jordanian food sovereignty look like? What questions do you need to be asking? And what questions can we take to start asking once we leave Jordan? Because things might look grim and all of that, but there is amazing work happening in Jordan. But I don't think Jordanians know about it. I don't. And that's one of the questions I'm going to leave Jordan asking. And I'm not just talking about work that's happening in food sovereignty. I mean amazing work that's happening on the art scene in Jordan that other Jordanians don't know about. Amazing healing that's taking place in various aspects of Jordan and Jordanian society. And the Jordanians don't. I was greeted, and I came a few days before Lauren, and I was greeted. My first day in Jordan was attending my friend's daughter's graduation, and what a perfect way to be welcomed by the country's future. Let me tell you something, it is bright. These kids can sing. They emanate joy. They emanate light and love. How are we going to protect this? That's my question.
There.
Also, I just intervene. I think people are asking questions here, and this exhibition is a manifestation of this. That all sorts of propositions about food, about water. People, and the young and the old are asking questions. It's as if we're blocked somehow. And the solutions are when people try to stand up, and I didn't mean to intervene, but this is
this is conversations. Yes, thank you.
The thing is, the structure is so much more powerful than the individual, and it has. I mean, look, when you say multinational corporation hold 60% of the food resource of the world, how do you fight such a beast?
The structure is more powerful than the individual, but not the collective. The power is always in the hands of us. It's the greatest illusion, the greatest myth that was ever told, was that we don't have that power.
The problem's not in the masses, the solution is. And yes, it gets overwhelming for us because the system is massive and it's old and it's intergenerational. And it's intergenerational to people who are in complete denial. And as they say, denial is not just a river in Egypt. Denial is real. But when we ask these questions, and I recommend, isn't there a quote that says, this is how friendship starts, when two people look at each other and say, oh, you too? We need to find all those you too's, because when we do, we come together. But I'd like an example of what tangible blocks come together.
Montreal, 2012, people came down, almost 1 million people in the streets because of Monsanto coming to dictate what we're talking about. Then there was a law after a few months saying if more than 50 people gather, it's a criminal. You have people found there was so much solidarity among them and a sea of people because the issues were real and people realized that they're not alone. But then as soon as there was this sea of solidarity that started to emerge, the state literally criminalized it, created all sorts of measures to stop any sort of gathering because they perceived it as a political organization and that translates into solidarity movements. So that's an example.
That's a very valid example, and it is one that continues to happen. And we will continue, we will have to continue to find ways to outmaneuver these laws. If the law says more than 50 people gathering can't gather, then we meet at 49s. We meet at multiple 49s. And I know this might sound trivial and jokey and petty, but you know what? If we need to be petty, we'll be petty. If we need to be silly, we'll be silly. But whatever it is we need to be the next version that helps birth a world that we deserve. All this African Union going around saying, oh, the Africa we want, the Africa we want. The truth is, we don't all want the same thing, but we all deserve similar things. We all deserve our divine rights. And in coming together to do that, in being unwavering to do that, we will find ways. Of course, they will come out with every new law and every new policy. And a great example of this is our partners in Palestine, UAC. UAC is doing phenomenal work in the face of the oppressive Israeli entity. Phenomenal work. During COVID, how UAC mobilized to provide food to people, to literally bring gardens to people's homes so they can start making and keeping their food so that they feel that they have some kind of control. But what happens? Israel labeled it as a terrorist organization. It raided its offices. It threatened its partners. But then it's up to us, it's up to the rest of us to recognize that as much as UAC is fighting for the rights of the Palestinians, UAC is fighting for our rights. Because whether you like it or not, who ate today? Who ate anything today? Anything, no, hands up, like really high, if you ate anything today. Whether you like it or not, you are part of the food sovereignty movement. Whether you are active in it or not, this food sovereignty movement is fighting for your right. How you choose to engage with it is entirely up to you. But this is what we mean. We need to find who's doing what, so that when one entity decides to attack and shut down, we raise that banner elsewhere. And I speak this again as my experience as a Sudani, because when the media blackout happened in Sudan, at the early stages of our revolution, our Kenyan sisters and brothers went outside the Supreme Court carrying the Sudanese flag, telling the Kenyan government, what are you doing in our name for our sisters and brothers in Sudan? Our Ghanaian brothers went outside, and sisters walked outside the Ghanaian presidential palace to say, what are you doing in our name for the Sudanese youth? Our South African sisters and brothers held concerts. Our Eritrean and Ethiopian people out in the diaspora marched. When you know that you're not doing this alone, and this is what we're doing at A Growing Culture. People don't know what's happening. People don't know who's fighting. People don't know how we're fighting. People feel helpless because the system is so big. But quite anything you do, if all you do one day is just find out something, learn something about this food sovereignty movement, you are engaging. Share it. Connect the dots. No one's saying this is going to be easy, but this crumbling of the system is coming, and it's coming as sure and certain as it has been created.
But I think that it's also important to recognize the successes. Right? Like, we all saw the largest protest in human history take place in India not that long ago, and they won against the fascist Modi government. Somewhat won. Okay, sorry. I was trying to prop it up a little bit. No, we'll see what happens, of course. Yeah.
It's painful. It's painful to recognize that even the wins are not full wins. But you know what? We need to celebrate every little win.
But there's models all around the world of people fighting.
We have some examples of them here. and on our website. And the fancy map Lauren was trying to get you to imagine is also on our Instagram page, so shout out.
And we have resources, everything. Grab a book when you leave. But to understand that our brothers and sisters in Brazil, Movimento Sem Terra, are organizing to claim land by the landless, right? And this is the largest social movement in the Americas, right? La Via Campesina has organized almost 300 million people to fight neoliberalism, right? Masipag in the Philippines have fought against GMO rice and the seed banks owned by multinational corporations. Tumtak Karet in Thailand has organized national food sovereignty models. We are not alone, right? And let's just talk about the laws that get passed. There's also the bullets that get shot. In Philippines, one of the countries we work in the most, 90% of the farmers in the Philippines don't own the land they till. They're caught in a feudal system put in place by guess who? US occupation. We've calculated with our partners that every 4 days, a farmer is shot, protesting that reality. Duterte, who finally left office for somebody even worse, Bongbong Marcos, has killed over 350 farmers in his reign of terror. One of the most dangerous jobs in the world is environmental and land defenders, his seed savers. Right? But the news will tell you that it's Bitcoin that's revolutionary. Come on. Power is in land and seed. This is our culture. So, you know, it is an Aboriginal statement, quote, if you came here to help me, I don't want your help. But if you came here because your liberation is bound to mine, then let's get to work. There's designers, there's architects, there's poets, there's academics, there's dancers. There's all sorts of people in this room. I'm so grateful for every one of you to be here. But let's work for collective liberation in any way we can.
I just want to say thank you for enlightening us on a lot of things here. But at the same time, if you look at Jordan or Palestine, even our rights for water, we can't even get it from our friendly country or the Israeli. We have very hard-working farmers in Jordan or in Palestine. And honestly, they suffer lack of water. That's number one, everyone knows about that. And how could you ask for that right if the government themselves can't even get the right for you? Jordan, one of the poorest countries as far as water. In Sudan, what you mentioned about Sudan is absolutely 100% right. They could keep the war. Unfortunately, the government there blocking everything for the farmers. Yet in Jordan, we try, or in Palestine, they try to give the farmers as much as they can, but when they have no water, there's a lot of issues here. Politics, power, who's in control.
Thank you for that. I'll answer you the question. Is Jordan lacking water, or has water been stolen from Jordan?
It's stolen from Jordan.
We need to get that narrative straight.
The right of water.
Exactly.
Coming from Israel or
Exactly.
coming from Syria, unfortunately.
What is the quote in the other room? The land is not barren. It is
The land is thirsty. But recognizing that it's not lacking, even in our words, even in how we recognize truths. Jordan is not lacking. Jordan is not lacking anything. We, as humans, are not lacking. We're not lacking anything. We are prepared to every stage in our life. In this stage I'm in right now, I am prepared for what's coming next for me and everyone in this room. If that's not something you believe, that's a different story. But simple fact is that there is balance in this universe. You were the audience, you were the one that said religion gives hope, right?
Yes.
If religion gives hope, then you understand there is a creator that is all-knowing,
Amen to that.
right? That is most generous, that is also just. ربنا اسمه الحق والعدل من الأسامي الكثير, right? Okay, so if that's the case, then we also need to recognize that the all-knowing knows exactly what we need at every single stage of our lives for us to do and be exactly what we need to be doing and being. So no, Jordan is not lacking. Jordan is not lacking anything. There is political will that is lacking. I'll give you that. But then, to balance that, there is people and there is power. And at the intersection of people and power is liberation. Jordan is not lacking water. Managing that water, perhaps. Reframing the narrative to reclaim it and step into the truth, I'll give you that. But we have to be very careful when we buy into rubbish narratives by people and entities that are outside of us. Africa is being paraded out as the poor continent.
So, Richard,
We are the richest
amen.
continent.
But you are sold. Everything is sold out.
The brain drain in Africa is another false narrative that all Africa's brains are ours. No. Africa isn't leaking. We generate and emanate power. Some of us are outside, yes, but there is pure ingenuity coming out of every inch of the continent. We need to recognize that. And it's not just there. Thank you. I get just like Petronella, I get really angry. When people are trying to tell me something, when people are trying to tell me that the creator that created everything we see around us forgot to give you what you need. There's no such thing. We just need to find how to do it. And we do that by coming together, preferably over food.
Always over.
But that's the truth. And we start reckoning with that. We need to stop telling our kids to be realistic. Reality is rubbish. Start dreaming, start imagining a new reality, start drawing and painting it and bringing and birthing it into existence. And I say birthing and I say it intentionally, recognizing every sister and woman in this room and beyond. Because each of us is here not just to birth children. We are here to birth entire worlds, because every human is an entire world, because we are infinite beings having a human experience. And we need to recognize that too. That is why they don't want us to come together. That is why the system is designed to isolate us. Because when every single world sitting on a chair in this room comes together, can you imagine the kind of power that yields?
I think there's less than 50 people here. 49.
That's enough to keep Bill Gates alive
So,
and
so
awake
let's work
at
49.
night.
You know,
Well, not alive. Awake. I meant awake.
and we do have visas for 5 more days.
Do we?
Yeah.
As long as we don't get arrested.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. Please stay with us.
We're going to be around. There are some nice, fancy pamphlets, booklets here. If you have more questions, we're here, and always encourage you to ask more questions. If you want to chat, we're going to be around for a little bit, but also do connect. And also don't just connect with us, connect with each other, please. If you're here for a reason and you didn't come with someone, leave with someone's contact. Because they have a message here for you. They have something to inspire you with, and you have something to inspire them with. And start building, really. And take a good look at the difference that we have in front of us. And remember, we are not in any way lacking. Thank you very much. Also, please keep eyes on Sudan. The revolution continues. June 30th is going to be massive. So if you can't do anything, just tweet out or put a hashtag out to keep eyes on Sudan.